Welcome to the Land to Lots podcast, powered by Launch Development Finance Advisors. And now your host, Carter Froelich.
Hello, everybody. This is Carter Froelich, and welcome back to the Land to Lots podcast. This is the second podcast as it relates to the management component of the launch sequence. And if you're just getting this podcast for the first time, I really encourage you to go back to the previous podcast, listen to the first in the series related to management. And you actually even may want to go back to the first podcasts where we discussed the launch sequence and the first components of that being the planning and implementation sections of our launch sequence. And those are described in episodes 36, 37, and 38 as it relates to planning, and the implementation in 42 and 43. In the last podcast related to management, we were talking about public bidding assistance. Now that we've gone through, we've done the public bidding, we're starting to construct all of our facilities. It is absolutely crucial, that we are collecting all of the required documents. And I swear to God, this is a huge, huge paper chase, meaning we have to document that we publicly bid the facilities and everything that's related to public bidding. Here again, that's only required in states where public bidding is a requirement. So now that we've completed the public bidding process, we're beginning to move forward and entering into contracts. The contractors are going out, they're beginning to build the infrastructure. And we're processing through the accounting and the contract departments, draw requests, we're writing checks, we're building the infrastructure. So the most important thing, and in every district across the United States, the developers have to be able to demonstrate that they have done what is required as it relates to public bidding, or and if public bidding is not required, that's fine, but they have to be able to demonstrate that they've contracted, they've funded, they've built this infrastructure, and it's free and clear of liens. And it is a paper jungle for sure. So oftentimes when our clients first get their district, we tell them, congratulations, you have a district. And then on the second breath, we say, our condolences, you have a district. Now there's a lot of documentation retention that we need to work with. And we at Launch have developed a system that falls under the heading of the launch control system and the launch reimbursement system. The launch reimbursement system is a huge electronic database that tracks all of the required documents that are going to be necessary for our client on that specific project in that specific state. The launch reimbursement system, or the LRS, rolls up to the extent that our clients have multiple projects in multiple states, rolls up into the launch control system, which is a summation of all of the clients' projects. And I'm going to get into each one of these in a little bit more detail. But the heavy lifter of this process is what we utilize to track this information, to identify if any information is missing. So say, for instance, we are working on a project in a state that requires us to go out and publish that we are going out to bids. If for some reason we don't have a bid posting on the property, or we have not shown that we have gone out to the local newspaper to notify the public of the upcoming bid, the launch reimbursement system, or the LRS, will tell us that. That way, we're not getting 2-3 years down the road, and as we're putting everything together, or now we have to go out and try to find a notice of publication. It tells us right away. The LRS tracks for our clients the public bidding documentation, the notice of bids, the bid postings, the publications, the pre-bid meeting notes, the certified bids, that came in, the awarded contract, the notice to proceed, all of that. To the extent that it's necessary, we're loading up in the LRS. As it relates to the accounting, as the invoices and draws are coming in and change orders, we're documenting those. Those are getting uploaded. We're showing proof of payment, meaning a canceled check or a wire, whatever is appropriate for the district and for the state. To the extent that we need certified payrolls, and in my experience, we only need certified payrolls in California and Nevada. We're getting those for each one of the individual draws, showing that union wages were paid to the contractors. And then we're getting the conditional lien releases. Once the infrastructure has been completed and accepted, we're getting acceptance letters. We're uploading the as-builts. We're preparing the reimbursement request, which is all now just a big summary of the information that's contained in the LRS. That is used to get our engineer certificates that everything that we've submitted is in fact eligible. And this is done all within the confines of our very robust database. And this database allows us to prepare, weekly, monthly, quarterly reports for our clients. And we have some clients that look at this LRS on a weekly basis as a means by which they're managing their cash, meaning, what do we need to do to get to the next reimbursement? Where are we in our reimbursement processes? How many binders have been submitted? How many have been reimbursed? What are our unreimbursed construction costs? All of this information is contained in our LRS. Now, I'm not necessarily here to throw this out there to sell you the LRS, although it's a great service in my opinion, but I'm trying to pass on to our listeners the type of documentation that needs to be retained. So, just because you get the district, that's just the part, that's just the start of it. If you do not have this documentation and you're not following the statutory legislation and our district requirements, and if you lose this documentation, if it is lost and you cannot submit it, more than likely, 90% chance, you will not be reimbursed. Now, as part of our backup plan, we put language in as part of our district agreements, plan A and plan B, should this ever happen. But I'm trying to have our listeners understand the importance of tracking this information. No paperwork, no money. It gets as simple as that. And so please make sure you're paying attention to what needs to get tracked and you're tracking that in a timely manner. Now, a lot of our clients have multiple projects in a state, or some of them are national developers and they have multiple projects in multiple states with multiple different requirements related to the district and state enabling laws. And in order for our clients to have a very effective management tool, we have prepared what we call the launch control system. And the launch control system is nothing more than a summation and roll up of all of the LRSs that our clients have, so that they have a very high level but detailed enough management tool for them to get a feel for where they're at in the construction project, or in the spend of infrastructure dollars related to their development project, what's been reimbursed, what is being processed. And this is ongoing knowledge that is passed on to management so that they can have an understanding of where they're at. Why is this important? Well, one of the most important things is that the launch control matrix will allow management to have an understanding of, okay, how are we managing our cash? What cash is going out? How much has gone out? When are we expecting cash to come in for our reimbursements? How much of those reimbursements are currently being processed? So, and that also could potentially fall into the budgeting, meaning we believe that we're going to be able to get 12, 13 million in this quarter through reimbursements. That's 12 to 13 million less that we don't have to go to equity or draw down on our revolvers. Or it could be an early indication of project challenges, meaning, wow, how come we're over budget on this project? How come we're getting so many change orders on this project? Or what's happened to this project? Why aren't reimbursements getting processed? What do we need to do to make sure that we're moving forward? And here again, that could be something in the accounting process, but here again, it holds us accountable too, as we all move with the goal of accelerating cash into the pro forma. The other reason that it's so important that to be utilizing tools like the LRS and the launch control system is that people in the development industry come and go. And when they come and go, they take a lot of that industry knowledge or project specific knowledge or district infrastructure financing knowledge with them. By having this all in the hands of launch, number one, we're tracking it for you. We're doing it. We've got the institutional knowledge that will never be leaving you. And more importantly, it's the mantra of who, not how. You don't need to have somebody to do it. You don't need to know how to do it. We will do it for you. And typically, this is reimbursed through bond proceeds, although that varies state by state. Let's get to the part of the LRS and the launch control system that says, show me the money. So once we get completed with a project, we are able to roll up and hit a couple of buttons on the LRS, and it quantifies, describes all of the infrastructure, all of the invoices, all of the draws, all of the lien releases, all of the proofs of payments, everything into an electronic binder. And these things can be thousands of pages long. It just depends on how the contract, or first of all, how the plans were drawn, how the infrastructure was contracted, and how it was bid and how it was paid for. But we're able to roll it all up, summarize it, and transmit it electronically to the district engineers for their review. Once we get done with this, we put it on the shelves so we know, when it comes time to issue bonds, what we're getting reimbursed for through each bond issuance, what we may be charging interest on, what real property has been paid for, what real property hasn't been paid for. But I mean, this is a specific listing of every piece of infrastructure by invoice, by draw, that is eligible for reimbursement. And then we track that as bond proceeds come in, what we're getting paid back for and what we haven't been paid back for. And here again, once we submit these things and then we go issue additional bonds, our goal is to get this trustees to release those checks to us, because we've already proved up how much infrastructure has been financed. And so there is no time delay. The money goes into the trustee, into the acquisition and project account on day one, and it goes out on day two, because we already know what we're getting reimbursed for. Most of the time, we'll be processing reimbursement of costs on a first in, first out basis, because number one, it's easiest for us to track it that way. The other thing, and why you want to do first in, first out, at least in my opinion, is that at some point, should there be a downturn in the economy, something happens like it did in the Great Recession, where no infrastructure is getting built or bonds are not being issued, and we have a lot of infrastructure in the ground, that infrastructure begins to age. And at some point, we could have a district engineer come in, or a financial advisor say, hey, we're not, we think this infrastructure is too old to reimburse you, because the remaining life of the infrastructure is shorter than the bond term. Therefore, we don't think that we can finance this infrastructure with a 25-year bond because the infrastructure only has a 10-year life. Now, here again, we've gotten into this conversation a million different times with financial advisors, and most of the time, 99.9% of the time, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know what useful lives are. They just heard it somewhere and they try to throw it out. But we literally then can go in on an invoice by invoice basis using standard engineering practices and showing them that, hey guys, this useful life, even though you think it's 10 years, we think it's 100. and based on when it was put in service, here's how much remains. Here's the average life of our bonds. As you can see, we have plenty of useful life remaining, and we're making sure that we get reimbursed for every cent of eligible infrastructure that our clients have put in the ground. The other beauty of having everything in the launch reimbursement system, or the LRS, is that this allows us to not necessarily have to bother our client. We can say, hey, it's now ready. We're ready to go do another bond issuance. Here's all the information we prepared. This is what we're anticipating in terms of what the next bond will be. By the way, this is what has been reimbursed to date based on our first in, first out method. This is the infrastructure that will be the subject of this bond issuance. What do you say, Mr. Client? Mr. or Mrs. Client say, yes, that looks good. Go get it done. We go get it done and wire the funds to them. And literally that's the amount of involvement that they have until, they have to make obviously representations related to the bond issuance and sign rep letters and review those documents. But for the most part, as it relates to the infrastructure that's being reimbursed, that's on a critical path. We've got it handled. They don't need to worry about it. And it just gives them more time to focus on things that make them money, as opposed to worrying, boy, do I have a lien release for this contract? So with that, I'm going to stop this podcast as it relates to the second component of the financing management of the launch sequence. And our next discussion that we'll be holding as it relates to managing a financing will be the continuing disclosure obligation of the developer to report to the bondholders. And so with that, I'm going to conclude this podcast. I thank you very much for listening. I know there's a lot of detail here. I've touched on it, very, very high level. Should you have any questions or want to do a deeper dive on some of these requirements or the LRS and the launch control system, by all means, reach out to us and we'll have our team set up a call with you. If you find this podcast interesting, please pass it on to your colleagues and please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you very much.
You have been listening to the Land to Lots podcast with Carter Froelich. Follow us wherever you find your podcast to never miss a new episode.